Is the Baptist Church in particular now letting down Paul Bogle and what he stands for in terms of what it was then and what it is now?
I would say we have fallen short, and we recognize that. I like to describe myself as a country girl. I grew up in the green hills of Walkerswood, in what I would describe as a matrifocal family. Didn't start out exactly that way. I actually grew up with my grandparents, but my grandfather died when I was fairly young, so I don't remember him as a very active person. I remember him when he was ill and eventually passed. So I actually grew up with my grandmother and a sister and 2 cousins. So we're 4 women in the house. So growing up with my grandmother was, I think, the best thing that could happen to me, because she was such a grounded, spiritual woman with very deep Christian values, very disciplined. And I think she passed on a whole lot to me. And I believe I'm who I am today, primarily because of that grounding. So I grew up in the church. I like to say before I was born, the church was my life for the most part, although I'm not that old, but back then church was everything. It was where you got your entertainment, So I was everything. I did everything in the church. I would join the teams that would go to clean, because back then we didn't pay people to clean churches. We did it ourselves, So I grew up doing that. Sunday school, vacation Bible school. And I think I grew up in an environment where I was affirmed, not just by family, but church. My pastor, the late Reverend A.O. Fraser, who was my pastor pretty much all my life. He died at 101 recently. My school, I remember my principal always
Which school is that?
Walkerswood All-Age School, it was then where I grew up. So everything was in the rural setting, church down the road, home there, school there. Yeah, Mrs. Trench was her name. Very affirming, and I think people from then saw a lot in me, much more than I could have imagined that would unfold. So I grew up rural Jamaica, very deeply involved in church, very close to home, and in an affirming environment, where I think I was allowed to be me and to express myself. And I think that kind of grounding has helped to shape me to today. I went to Ferncourt High School in Claremont, St. Anne, where I spent 5 years. We didn't have sixth form then. I was affirmed. I remember being named the best all-round student at the time, though I don't think I was the brightest. But I did a lot of debating. That was my thing. I used my mouth a lot from then. I was a prefect, and I left St. Anne, I think just after high school. I came into Kingston to do my A-levels. I went to Excelsior Community College to do my A-levels because we didn't have a sixth form. And so I left country to town. I went to UWI, did a degree in history. Actually wanted to be a lawyer, and I didn't get in immediately, so I figured that, I was told that, that's a good degree to do on the route to doing law. Completed that degree and was enjoying what people now call a gap year. We didn't use those terms then.
So your gap year would have been after
a first degree, yes. And went back to St. Anne, And Howard Isaacs reached out to me. He was one of the past JTA presidents, was principal at Monique. He had just done, I think, the same degree, as a matter of fact. So he reached out to me and said, your alma mater needs you. They need a teacher of history. They are well into the school term. I think it was towards the end of October, and they had nobody. And you know, I was like, well, I can't say no. Yeah. So I went to Ferncourt and taught history for 2 years. Of course, that was not in my plan. Right. And it was actually while I was there teaching history that I felt a call to ministry through one of our assemblies, something similar to what we completed recently in the closing service at the arena. The late Reverend Dr. George Simpson preached a sermon which I think left me deeply saddened because it became very clear to me that, you know, I was being spoken to. And as I left me saddened because never in my life did I dream of or imagine becoming a pastor. That was not a part of my plan, in my imagination. So
the thought of being a pastor made you sad?
Yes, it made me sad because I think the reality of the demands, although I was still a fairly young lady, but it did occur to me that this would be a little different. I didn't grow up seeing women in ministry. So I recognized that I was going to be traveling in, one could say, uncharted waters. Not that there were not other women being pastors in other churches and so on, but certainly it's not what I saw every day. And also, I really was very focused on doing law. That's what I wanted to do. Yes, but then, even as a child, I always prayed, Lord, let your will be done in my life. I grew up praying that prayer daily. And so I felt then that if that's my prayer as a Christian and God is calling me in this particular direction, how can I say no? Yes. So I felt a sense of compulsion. I felt that, you know, but then I also have always been and still is someone who I interrogate things. I have to be sure. And so I interrogated that.
Well, I guess the paper, the certification doesn't stop you from doing what you do best. And lawyers interrogate.
Exactly. Yes. Well, I told you I was a debater too. Yes. So I really interrogated the prospect of that, and I asked the Lord, I said to the Lord, Lord, you have to show me in a multiplicity of ways that this is really so, that I am not just having this grand idea that emerged somewhere from out of my subconscious that, you know, you need to. And I think through a number of different ways, I became very clear that this is indeed God's call on my life. And I decided to say yes. I journeyed from there to the UTCWI, United Theological College of the West Indies, where I received my theological training. Well, there was a year. Usually when you're accepted by the JBU, there is a year when they give you space to continue to discern, you know, if this is really what, and for they too to discern whether this is really, you know. So, you know, there is, we have this committee that interviews you and discerns and so on. Yeah, so I've been talking and talking, but that's the early. That's the beginning, I would say. That's the beginning.
So when did you finally realize that law had no more space for you?
I think having said yes to the call of God to serve in what I perceived then to be, you know, full-time ministry, I made a commitment, and when I make a commitment, I tend to keep my commitments. Okay. So for me, this was what God had called me to do. I don't think I sat down and said, well, law would never be it, therefore. I don't think I actually sat down and made that decision. But I think over time, that desire and that thirst just, you know, just disappeared. Yeah.
What do you think that your accession to this office can bring to the rejuvenation that the church
right.
Needs?
Well, first of all, I say it's something that we have to do together. That I do not see it possible for Merlin Hyde Riley single-handedly to make this, to cause this transformation to happen. But I think that given the position I'm in, I ought to help to inspire that kind of transformation that is so necessary. And I believe that I will bring that. I have worked with youth for a long time, and I think I have come to understand young people. Can't say I fully understand them, but I think I have learned a lot over the years in working with young people. One of the things I would have learned is that relationships are important for young people. Authentic relationships, and I say authentic because sometimes we underestimate the eyes through which young people see us, and they can spot false, fake. Yeah. That's the word they use very quickly. Yeah. And I think young people want authentic relationships. And I think that is something that as church we have to work on. I think young people want their voices to be heard and responded to. Because, sometimes we listen, but at the end of the day, we move on. Mm-hmm. So we say, okay, we want to hear the voice of the young people, but they speak and we carry on just the same. Mm-hmm. And I think we have to be a lot more intentional in listening, hearing, and responding. And responding means allowing young people space to teach us.
Does the Baptist Church provide that space for them to be who they are, be young people?
To some extent, but we need to do more. We need to do more. So at a congregational level, this varies. There are some pastors, there are some churches that make space, adequate space. And there are others not so much. But I think from a denominational level, this is an area that we have to target more intentionally. And, we did so some years ago. And I think we have to redouble our efforts in terms of just helping to galvanize our youth. Our youth mirror us in a lot of ways. Sometimes we become so structured and so bureaucratic that we have systems in place, but in terms of galvanizing the youth as a movement, I think we have failed to do that adequately. And it really requires more intentional efforts and focus. And in terms, we are in the process now of developing a strategic plan for the union, and which is one of the major things that I will be giving leadership to. And the youth and youth-related engagement will definitely be a significant aspect of that. Our Christian education, the focus on Christian education is an area that I think as a denomination, as a country, we will have to pay greater attention to. With the cultural shifts that's taking place in the world, with the globalization and the impact of all these other cultures, contexts, systems, we are impacted because we don't live in isolation. And therefore we have to redouble our efforts in terms of discipleship of our young people, in terms of reinforcing certain values. Some of these, I would want to say, basic values that we're losing, the value of community, the value of family, the value of respect, the value of integrity, love of neighbor. It is obvious that there is a shift taking place in the society, and I think the church has traditionally played a very significant role in reinforcing these values. And to some extent, I think we are failing our young people because there is quite a bit of disconnect. We seem not to be able to capture their imagination. The ways in which we capture the imagination of young people like myself must be different from the young people now. It's a different world. So yes, our mission remains the same, but I think we have to recognize that our strategies will have to change,
When you engage with the young people, especially as you were in charge of youth education,
yes.
What is it that they tell you that they want to see, how they want to be seen, and what they want to do?
Well, they want respect, which they sometimes feel that they don't get. They want to be able to trust people who say they have their interest at heart, but sometimes they don't feel that they are able to trust these people. To trust them meaning to be able to relate to them without feeling judged. Young people feel judged a lot, and when they feel judged, they withdraw. And unfortunately, our churches are often guilty of judging our young people. They want to know that they are taken seriously.
But do they feel that they ought not to be judged, or they feel that they are too judged?
I think they feel that, I don't think they feel they ought not to be judged. But I feel that they think that space should be created for them to be able for you to understand what is going through their heads and their minds and so on before you pass judgment. So they want to be listened to and understood.
Okay.
And they feel that very often they are judged without us even taking the time to even bother to engage.
Okay.
And I think very often...
So sometimes the disengagement is, you don't know the reason, but you see the disengagement, and when you engage, after the disengagement, then you understand the reason why they go there. So the church is essentially, they consider the church still a lot in judgment.
Yes. And many
of
them...
Is that a weakness of the church? Is the church too judgmental, too critical of the very persons who it needs to build the body of Christ?
Yes, I mean,
when I say the church in general.
Yes, I think so. I think we need to be more affirming and less judgmental. I think we have failed to be as prophetic and the kind of advocates that we are called to be as a church. And of course, there are voices. We hear there are different ministers of the gospel, lay people, other people, who will from time to time speak. And there are times when we will speak as an ecumenical body. We speak through the Jamaica Council of Churches, for example. But I think that there is more. And I would say this is, as a union of churches, as we do our reflection, I think this is one area that we are agreed that we have to re-engage more deeply with these issues. As Baptists, this is part of our identity. This is who we are in terms of engaging with the issues that impact persons, those on the margins, those who are most vulnerable, and finding practical solutions within what we are able to do as a church, but also holding responsible those who have been elected to get certain things done. And
when you said those who are elected, you mean the political
yes,
electorate?
yes, the government,
Yeah.
whoever is in
Okay,
government, because governments have been elected to do certain things.
Yeah.
So the role of the church, naturally, I think without the church, we would be much worse in Jamaica. A lot of the schools are owned by the church. When you talk about early childhood education, that's for the most part a church-run thing. So we have a lot of health responses within the country through churches. Yes, as it relates to social services and so on during COVID. I mean, it's amazing the efforts of the church. So I think the church recognizes its role. We do not always fulfill it as we should, but I think we have to hold the government accountable because they are elected to do certain things, which we do not necessarily have all the resources to do, and which we do not necessarily have the authority to do based on the legal framework within which we operate and so on. And perhaps there are times we have been a little coward. There have been times we probably don't want to be alienated or to be branded.
Or not to get an invitation.
Or not to be, yes. But I think we have a responsibility to continue to speak truth to power.
Is the Baptist Church in particular now letting down Paul Bogle and what he stands for in terms of what it was then and what it is now?
I would say we have fallen short, and we recognize that. I don't think that we are comfortable or at ease with the state of affairs. I think we recognize that there is a lot more that we can do, that we command enough in terms of followership. We command enough in terms of the spaces in which we are found, the opportunities for our voices to be heard, the opportunities to make a difference. And I think going forward, this is a commitment that I can make on behalf of the union, because this is something we have spoken about. And it certainly will form a part of our strategy going forward in terms of how we are more deliberate. We as a church, we Jamaica Baptist Union, Baptists in Jamaica, it is a formerly enslaved black man from the United States who started Baptist Witness in Jamaica. So we are deeply conscious, of, we live in a country that is still predominantly black. We live in a country where we recognize that there is still a far way to go as it relates to affirming the humanity and dignity of people and ensuring that every person can flourish. And I think we're deeply committed to human flourishing. And as a result of that commitment, I think we will continue and we will increase our efforts, to ensure that there is greater equity, that there is more justice. The whole business of a livable wage, for example, when we met during our assembly last month in February, a resolution was passed by the assembly in terms of the need for us to speak more strongly on this issue. So we were actually quite heartened to see the improvement with the minimum wage, but we would have wanted to see it even an even better improvement, because there are those of us who feel very strongly about the fact that every single Jamaican should be able to live in dignity, you know, in terms of being able to afford the very basic necessities of life. So that's an issue we spoke to when we met together during the assembly. You know, I think that the Paul Bogles are around, but I'm not so sure. Not so sure why. Yes, I am. I don't know why we have become almost docile. I think there are a lot of people who are really very conscious, very aware, very discerning, but probably who need to, you know, I don't know if the media needs to take responsibility for some of this, because I think that there are persons who are speaking, who are acting, but very often it is not sensational enough for the media, so people don't necessarily hear about it. I think every Sunday from the pulpit, people are challenged. I think in most of our churches, there are, you could almost say, activist movements in terms of the work that people are doing. But you know, we tend to prefer to carry the headlines of murder and mayhem, because for whatever reason that seems to be what sells. So I am saying that probably
Paul Bogles are not there.
No, very alive and well.
Jamaica is a country in deep trouble, socially. I'm not even going to the other part, but socially, because it socially impacts everything else.
Yes.
We are not living good. We are awful. We are selfish. We are our lives are dirty, brutish, short, and just nasty. How are we going to change that?
Well, I mentioned earlier about our Christian education programs and youth. And I could also add education. And when I say education, I make reference to our involvement in schools. The church historically has been very involved in school, and we continue to be involved. In fact, I think the records will show that some of what we would rate as the best schools in Jamaica in terms of performance and otherwise are actually church schools. I think that is one area that we can continue to make an impact. And so we need to do a lot more in terms of working with our schools to ensure that there is a strong program focus on building character building and character formation. And although there is this partnership, certainly with our primary schools, all-age high schools, with the government, and the government has its own curriculum, but I think as church we have to continue to be very deliberate in insisting that our church schools, there is space in the curriculum for this kind of character building and formation. And there are some of our church schools that are currently doing that now. And of course, the chaplaincy program is also an aspect of what is employed. So there is the school. There is the Christian education program in our churches through our Sunday school. I don't think any of us can minimize the impact of this Sunday school on our lives generally. Even people who didn't grow up in Christian homes and their parents insisted that they go to Sunday school. I think there is still a place for that, for just teaching people how to treat one another. Basic things like love your neighbor as yourself, that we live in community, that we are not just individuals that can exist by and of ourselves, that we need each other, to sensitize persons about, justice, about how you resolve conflicts. So I think we have avenues through which we can continue to make a difference. and we just have to be more intentional, because with the cultural shifts and changes, and we have to find other ways, because some of them not coming to us anymore. So we have to find ways to get to them. We have to use up the different communication tools that are now. The church can't afford to stick with the tools of the past exclusively. But we have to get where people are in terms of the utilization of the new methods of communication, the Instagram and the TikTok and you name it. You know, we have to try to find ways to ensure that even the Sunday school materials, for example, that we produce is in formats such as these, because young people hardly reading anymore.
The phone is a whole
yes.